So just a quick thank you to those teams that have participated in the past. 2018 was a phenomenal season for fires. Just a couple of stats here. 229, that's how many teams actually used fires last year. Either they scouted, they used the dashboard, or they used the pick list. That is about a 300% jump from the prior year. We scouted 22 competitions, including 4 of the divisions in the world competitions. We scouted we scouted 884 teams. So of all the teams in first FRC, we had data on 884 of the teams. So this is a big number, and this is one of the reasons why this is so important that you share with other teams at competitions about what the fires is. It's really great to go to a competition and have data on teams you've never seen before. This is especially important when you start going to world competitions and things like that. You may have data on half the teams there that you've never seen, just because there's so many teams now using this application. The last number, this is the number of matches that were scouted. Now, it's not physical matches because we have a scouter that watches one team. So this is really the number of teams by the number of matches. So 12,000 matches is a lot of scouting effort that's going on. And really, if you take that one step further, there was about 250,000 transactions. So every button push on a tablet, there was about 250,000 of those that were scouted for last year. So big stuff, lot of traction we're starting to get. So for those of you that are new to this collaborative effort that we have been doing for a number of years, the Innovators Robotics will actually develop the application, develop the dashboards. We support all the infrastructure, the servers, the licensing, all the program management, all the database administration. That's something that we do as a team to be able to share to the rest of the FIRST community. Areas of opportunities if you want to jump in and help, and we had some of this last year, and it was huge, and some of the things that were done we actually incorporated into the application. So I know Bomb Squad Team 16 last year did some how-to videos, and we actually incorporated those videos that you could link right to. We have a help page now on the Fires application. So if you're interested in doing those kinds of things from a documentation and or if you like to shoot videos, there's some good opportunities there. Probably the biggest thing is word of mouth marketing, whether it's through Chief Delphi or just other teams at competitions, because like I said, the more teams that end up using this, the more data that we have, the better the system really becomes. So one of the things that we look at is those teams that join these calls. We really want you to be active and participate in these calls. It's not just a one-way dump of information. There's going to be lots of opportunities that will show something, or maybe want some input on some design that we're thinking about. We'll weigh the pros and cons of the designs. If you have some ideas about look and feel, obviously we can't think of everything. If you guys have some good ideas, we want to incorporate those ideas within reason. There are definitely some things that are really good ideas that are extremely complex, and we'll look at those things, and we will prioritize based on what our available bandwidth is for those kinds of things. We want input from data presentation and strategies. So if your team is running a specific strategy and you need specific kinds of data for that strategy, then we want to know that. We've tried to think of any possible strategy, but there obviously are going to be other things. We want to make sure the system supports the strategy that you're trying to run. We want you to collaborate with other teams at competitions. What we found is we're not a huge team, and probably one of the best things that this offers us is to work with other teams on the scouting effort. Instead of having 6 kids try to do scouting, we can work with 5 or 6 other teams, and we might have 50 kids available to us. So when you have that many students, then the whole scouting effort itself is not a big burden for any one particular team. People always say, well, aren't you giving away your, the whatever your strategic advantage is? And really the scouting system collects data, presents data. It's still up to the team to take that data and use it appropriately for whatever they want to use it for, because that can be a wide variety of different strategies and a different way that people might want to use the data. So it isn't necessarily, we certainly have ideas how we're going to use the data, but once again, that's really kind of up to each team what they do with it. And like I said before, spread the word. So we are going to continue with the same application style that we've had. It's a web-based system, all HTML, so we're not tied to any specific platform. So if you have Android tablets or you have iOS tablets or Windows tablets, it really doesn't matter. It will work under all of those equally well. Some of the underlying technology like Bootstrap, Angular, TypeScript, that's just kind of what we write those pieces in. Our web server is actually running on a Microsoft Azure cloud. It's an IIS server, and it is a true REST API. That's how we do all the reading and writing into the application through a secure API. That's all written in C#. The backend data is SQL Server, also on that Azure cloud. And then our reporting engine, we use Tableau Online. The reason we do that is we can embed that within our application, so it kind of looks like it's part of the application. It is real time. For those of you that have used other systems that you have to match scout and either key in data or take it somewhere and Bluetooth connect it and pass the data, that's not how our system works. It is a real-time system. As soon as it's scouted, it's available to the drive team. So it's match scouted into the system and immediately run dashboards and graphs right out of the same system in real time. And just quick high-level view is match scouting. We have 6 tablets that are collecting data connected to generally Bluetooth, since Wi-Fi is not, or we're not allowed to use Wi-Fi at a competition, and some kind of 4G devices. A lot of people use different things, anything from a tethered phone to dedicated Bluetooth routers. There's a lot of different choices here, and we can talk about those if you have additional questions about that. I don't want to get into a big sidebar discussion, but if you have questions, feel free to contact me, and we can talk about those items if you're new to this whole thing. Once again, there's a recommendation on the tablet. We recommend 10-inch tablets. There's a number of teams that do use 7-inch.
Sorry, I missed
No problem. Oh,
you gotta tell me I'm a husband. I'm a robot.
I'm communicating with you from now on. So.
I'm a robot.
So far, so good.
Do you have a question, Tom?
We're about a week behind him, but we'll get there.
Y'all should.
All right. You just go.
Thomas Carnes, did you have a question? Okay, I just want to make sure. So we do have recommended tablet requirements. Probably the biggest thing is the minimum resolution needs to be 1024 by 768. We do recommend a little higher, but there is the minimum requirement. Part of the application, there is a link to that mydevice.io, which will tell you exactly what the resolution of a device is if you're not sure. We always say also some way to run power or have backup battery. That always seems to be an issue in the middle of a competition, especially on the first whole day of competition. Things tend to use up battery pretty quickly. Any questions about that? That for those of you that I know this is repeat for those of you that have used it, but anyone new, is there any questions relative to any of that? Okay, so the Fires is a full suite of products, really. It has pit scouting, it has match scouting, it has some strategy dashboards, which are graphs and charts to show accumulation of data, trends, um, lots of varieties of graphs that we've done over the years. It has a pick list assistant, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a few minutes. And it has an administrative console. So all of these features are always part of the Fires application. There's some other things that we're thinking about that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes. I'm going to skip over all the detail of all these. If you didn't know how to get to the Fires application, here's the URL for it. It's innovators3138.org/fires. And actually, it is not, that's a mistake in there. It should be HTTPS. We are now a secure website as well. So if you go to this website, it gives kind of a high level overview, and then there's links to several of the past years. If you link to this year, it just says it's under construction right now. But if you haven't used this before and you want to get in there and kick the tires, you can go into last year's application and choose the login option, and then you can log in as a guest, and then you can pretty much do anything you want within the application. Don't feel you're going to break something, because it just logs everything against a sample regional, our Nemo regional. So feel free to get in there and play around if you haven't used it before. So we switch to this year's game, and one of the first things we try to look at is what data will we even have available to us. So that kind of really sets the stage for what do we need to collect and how do we need to collect it. So obviously all the pickups of hatch and cargo, we want to see, and really when we start talking about the application, if you haven't used Fires before, is we do everything with an event that happens, and that event has a count with it. It also has a location associated with it, because we like to do things like heat maps and traffic flow and things like that. So we track the location of everything that happens. So every pickup, we know where those pickups are. Just like with the pickups, all the placing in the cargo ship and the rocket, and we do the locations and counts of those as well. So one thing that we've always done is, especially for cycles, is we've tracked the time. Now, you kind of take this with a grain of salt, because it really becomes how quickly or how accurately the scouter is recording things, how real time they're recording. But over time, you're going to get a pretty good picture of these times. I wrote here both directions, because in the past we've captured the cycle time that, and we defined the cycle as from the point something gets picked up to the point something gets either placed or dropped. So that cycle time was like from the point I pick up a cargo to the point that I placed it in the rocket level 2. That's what we considered a cycle. This year, what we're going to do, because the game pieces have the potential to maybe be difficult to pick up for some teams, we're going to time that both directions. So there's going to be a cycle from pickup to place, and then also a cycle from place to pickup, because that really ends up being acquisition time. How long does it take to actually pick up a cargo or a hatch from either the floor or from the feeder station? So we can start looking at those times to see which teams are more efficient at picking things up, as well as which teams are efficient at scoring those pieces once they have them. Any thoughts about that?
Hey Rob, so I've got just a quick point from last year. I like the idea of that for the timing both directions. One thing I was wondering is, do you have a plan for if you were to say score a cargo and then go to pick up a hatch? Do you care about what they just did, or that they just did something as the starting time for your the starting timestamp for a pickup cycle?
Yeah, I think what we're thinking right now is from the point that they dropped it off until the point they pick up anything, because there starts becoming too many different types of cycles, and I think it would start muddying the water a little bit. We'll start with this, and we can always change.
All right, I was definitely thinking that's the right way to go on that. Another thing I was gonna just say is, I think if you can just distill down to having the total cycle counts and average cycle counts for teams, that's super powerful, because those cycle times are good, but if scouts are prone to errors, and the average numbers are an easier metric, I think, to distill down how good a team is at one game piece. And you could do there's things you can do with that if you want to just look at purely hatches or purely cargo.
Yeah, and I think what we might try to do this year is maybe do like a standard deviation on the time somehow, because if there are outliers, we want to make sure you know that there's an outlier. You know, if you have if the average is 12 seconds and you have an outlier that is 45, maybe the scouter had a problem or something. So at least we'll know with a standard deviation, it'll tighten that up a little bit, and your average will be a little bit more believable. Okay.
I feel like you would only be able to actually get that standard deviation in there if you got some sort of confirmation from the scouter that something went wrong with their reporting. So how are you going to figure out what the standard deviation is if you're not getting any info like that?
Well, we would just be looking at all the cycles.
Oh, you're looking at the average of cycles, basically.
Yes, we'll do the standard deviation on the average, yes. Okay. So some other things that we have this year that are unique to this year's game, I'll call it climbing, but it's basically that getting up the steps on the end into the habitat zone. And there's some different things that can happen here. And we've had this in some past years where I can climb to a certain level. So let's say my robot climbs to level 2. But you also have, did I assist somebody else? Does my robot have a ramp on it that I deploy and somebody else drives that up that ramp to level 2? So not only did I get there, but I can assist somebody else getting there. The other issue is, did I get to level 2, but did somebody assist me? So there's really 3 modes in this climbing. I did it myself, somebody helped me get there, or I helped somebody else get there. And then the other aspect is we always time these just so we know how much time it takes each team to get to each level, just because that's a good strategy to try to figure out from a clock standpoint who should do what when, because we know how long each team takes to get to a specific level. Is there any other thing about climbing that we don't have, or any other observations for those teams that have had climbing types of issues in the past?
Yeah. Hey, Rob.
Yes.
So I think one thing, especially when we're taking the new scouts that we do, it's not clear cut out when a climb begins. So that might be something that we're mentioning when you're training new scouts.
I apologize. You're cutting out. I can't hear you very well. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I think one thing that needs to be stressed more is the time when a climb starts, because the definition of when a climb starts might vary across different people. So there's like a clear cut out point where it's when they're on the platform or when they deploy whatever mechanism they use. I think that would be a good thing to mention when you're training new scouts.
I only heard part of that. I think you're just a little far away from the microphone, and it's a little struggle. But I think it was something along the lines of making sure to train the scouters so they understand what these climbs actually are.
Yeah.
Okay. Match timing. Basically, if you could actually look at a team across a whole match, is there a sequence that they do, and what time do they do them? This is pretty useful to know if a team does a certain path all the time, a repetitive path. You know who does what when. It's good for strategy planning. If a team wants to do their normal whatever they do, then we just need to plan around that to figure out so we don't have traffic issues and stuff like that. Lastly, the Habline crosses in the sandstorm mode. They're actually two different kinds of crosses. The reason I bring this one up here is this is generally, over the last several years, we've been actually able to extract this from the first API. This is really good because this is one of those things the scouters always forget to do. So if we just get that from the first API, we don't have to scout it, but we can still incorporate it in with everything else that we do. Defense. We're gonna put in the ability to label defense. I believe that this game is less defensive than a lot of other games, but however, we still have the ability that a team could defend another team. We have had mixed success with teams, scouters actually doing defense in the past, but we'll put it in there. If you use it, you use it. If you don't, it's there for your use. Also, things like fouls and breakdowns. We always record those kinds of things. Is there any other things, events that happen that maybe we want to track or keep track of that we haven't listed here?
So, hey again, Rob. I'm gonna put in a little bit of thought towards fouls. I'm not sure how much emphasis you put on making sure that scouters have really good knowledge of fouls. But I know when I was scouting in previous years, I didn't have the most up-to-date knowledge on fouls specifically, tech fouls versus normal fouls, basically, and then I believe we're also charting down yellow cards and red cards as well. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we want to make sure that scouters have the really just up-to-date knowledge on what the fouls actually are. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to be getting much reporting on fouls. And we may not be getting much anyway because they're really hard to to put in there in the moment while bots are doing other things like cycling. But I'm just kind of talking from a practical standpoint more so. I would emphasize getting all scouters you plan to work with up to date on, or really more just telling scouters you need to know the fouls. That is something that's important to be scouting. So,
yeah. And that's a really good point. Over the years, we've had very specific fouls, and every year we've backed off more and more on specific fouls. I think this year we're going to have 4 foul categories: a foul, a tech foul, a yellow card, and a red card. Just because it's too difficult for the scouters to know what the foul was. It's hard enough to know what team even got the foul, even though the ref sometimes points. And it really is highly dependent upon how obvious the ref is on pointing out the foul and whether or not they cross their arms or just point the flag. The tech foul versus the regular foul. A lot of scouters don't know that. So that's really key if, in fact, you do want to track those things. Once again, the system is designed to maybe track more than you want to. But if you do want to track things like defense, fouls, breakdowns, it's already in the system. It's kind of a freebie. We don't have a whole lot to do to add it into the next year's game, so it's there. But yeah, use it if you want to. But it is important to make sure your scouters do understand, just to get consistency from match to match. Good point. Thank you. So the next area I want to talk about is pit scouting. Some teams use pit scouting, some teams don't. It actually, you're able to do it with a phone as of a few years ago, so that does make it a little simpler. The pit scouting, the stuff that we've thought of, let me just get them all up here. During the sandstorm, these are all the things you can do in sandstorm. So just being able to, are you capable of doing these things? How many things can you do? Is there some preference that you have on doing something? Is there a preferred game piece? Yeah, we can do both, but we prefer to do the hatch. We're much better at that. So just kind of some data points from a strategy standpoint. All this data does present itself on the dashboards. So if you collect it, it's going to be on the dashboard. It's just another set of data points. Teleop, a lot of the same things. And then the climb is kind of what we talked about earlier, as to what level were you able to help with other robots? Did another robot help you? How do you assist another robot? Do you actually pick them up? Do you have a ramp? Whatever. So some of these might be more of a free-form text field describing something. And then we usually collect some data on the drive team, just so we know, your experienced drive team, is your coach a student or a mentor? I know our team likes to know that last one, just to be able to, when they go to talk to the other team, whether or not they're going to be working with an adult or another student. Have they had time to do practice? How much time have they driven their robot? That could be anywhere from 0 to several weeks. Makes a big difference when you're driving. The robot itself, there's some unique features. Are you able to put attachments on? What was your inspected weight? So if you're a ramp bot that's going to help another team, that might be interesting to know. How much do you weigh? Because we've tested our ramp for so many pounds. And then we just generally have some general notes, and maybe if the team has an overall strategy. We do hatches, and we do hatches on the rocket. That's what we do best. That's what we want to do from a strategy standpoint, and just kind of plan around that. So that's the pit scouting. If you have any other ideas, shoot me an email. Like I said, I will make this PowerPoint available, and this video will be available if you want to go back and review it at a later point. So let's talk about map scouting a little bit. Some of the things that we started doing about 2 years ago and did a lot more of it last year is we tried to make it easier for the scouter. If a scouter picked a location and an event, then we could infer. So for instance, if I did a place and the location was somewhere in here, I know that I scored at the cargo ship. I don't have to do a special button for scoring at the cargo ship, because based on the location, I know that's the cargo ship. All I have to do is say they scored. Similarly, if it's at these locations in the blue, I can just say score, and I know it's scored at the rocket ship. So it makes it easier for the scouter, because I just pick a location and then score. I don't have to have a lot of different buttons for different things. So what we kind of thought of is we kind of thought this thing through, and this is kind of a prototype of what that might look like. So we have on the left-hand side pickup hatch, pickup cargo, and foul, and on the right-hand side drop, score, and breakdown. So we tried to use the same logic on the pickup that we did on the score, like we just talked about a minute ago. So we have one drop and one score, and based on the location is where we dropped or where we scored. However, it gets kind of tricky in this area right here. So I can have these things if I want to say I picked up these cargo at that location, which is I've forgotten what that's called. It's something. It's got a unique name. I also have this feeder zone area, or the feeder I could be picking up from, and I have this whole area. Depending how good the scouter is how close it's going to be. The problem is if you select something right here, it might have been a pickup off the floor, or is that a pickup from, or is that someone that acquired a cargo that came out of the feeder station? We don't really know. So there was kind of this long discussion that we had about, can we infer that, and how good is the scouter going to be? The other thing is, does anyone believe from a scouting standpoint, those 6 balls in that special location, is that any different than picking up a ball off the floor in anybody's eyes?
You could use an ultrasonic and view the hab if you're picking from the depot, but that would be harder if you're getting them from the floor of the loading station.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from a scouting standpoint, would there be any difference on either a cycle time or capabilities of a robot, whether I picked up off the floor or out of that special area where those 6 cargo are? Or can we assume that those are kind of one and the same?
Given that you can't defend there, I don't think it matters terribly much. Pit scouting data will tell you if a team can only pick up from the station or not, if you really care about that. So I'd say it is not critical.
Right. So we can assume that we don't need a special pickup for that area where those predefined balls are located, because really that's the same as just picking up off the floor. Is that, am I reading you correctly?
If your system could get cargo from the loading station, like it dropped directly into it instead of getting from the floor, you'd.
I'm talking about this area right here where these 6 cargo are. And someone help me out. What's that called? I've forgotten off the top of my head. Depot.
The depot?
Thank you. Yeah. So if I pick up a ball from the depot, is there really any difference between picking up from the depot or just picking up off the floor?
The only thing that it would kind of show is strategy first, whether or not they want to use the cargo that are on the floor versus the cargo that are in behind the Alliance station. This might, strategy might be easy to see and maybe needed at a different level of competition. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I absolutely do believe it's different from picking up off the floor versus from the feeder station. That is absolutely different, because that could be a robot coming up and the only thing it can do is getting a ball dropped into it versus being able to pick it up off the floor. So I agree that the feeder station and the floor is different, but is the depot and the floor, are those the same or are those different?
If they feed it through the feeder station and pick it up from there, strategy-wise, I think that would be different.
Yes, I get that. I'm really asking, is it different from the floor and the depot, or are those one and the same? The depot being this area right here.
They are the same.
Okay. I got one vote for the same. Oh, because what I'm looking at here is, what's the capability of the robot getting it from the depot? You have to be able to pick it up off the floor. So is it any different than picking it up off the floor in that general location? Same thing holds true is from a timing wise, it's almost the same spot as any other ball that's on the floor in that general area. So timing wise, it's not going to really affect your cycle, whether I got it from the depot or just generally off the floor there. Is that an assumption that we can make, that we really only need 2 kinds of pickups, one from the floor and one from the feeder station?
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Okay, good. At least we have 2 or 3 people that think that. If you don't agree, let me know, because I want to make sure that we're not making an assumption that might be false. Because what that does is it does give us another requirement from a scouting standpoint. Instead of having a single pickup, we end up something with more like this, where we have a floor pickup and we have a feeder pickup for the hatch and the cargo. So now we have 4 buttons for pickup, but I think in order to be able to accommodate the differences between can I only feed from a feeder, or what's my time from a feeder versus what's my time from the floor, I think there's enough difference between those that I think it makes sense to have both of those capabilities from those 2 different sets of locations. Does everybody agree with that, or does anybody not agree with that?
I agree. I'm just wondering if we need something to tell us that a robot is capable of picking up from the other side of the field, because it cannot go outside of its frame to pick up a ball on that side of the field.
Well, remember we have locations.
Right,
So
that's what I'm asking. Location will suffice then?
yeah, because what you'll see is when we start looking at things like the heat map, if I want to look at a team's pickup, and if I'm the red team and I have a bunch of pickups over here on the blue side, that means that historically I will go over there and pick up balls off the blue side if they're available.
Okay, that's fine.
So our heat map will do that for us. So the other thing is, when we're talking about locations, is things like when I pick that location on the rocket, I have a location, so I know where I'm scoring these on the rocket, on which spot that I'm scoring. So if the location was on this side, then I know I'm scoring them over there. If it's on the other side, I'm scoring them over there. Obviously the hatches are going to be on the side, and the cargo is going to be in the middle. At least I would think that probably most of the time. But there's nothing that says that the team couldn't score cargo through the side if they wanted to. It's just a specific location for the scouting system. It doesn't really matter. The challenge, however, is on a field like this, it's a 2-dimensional field for the scouter. So we have no way to indicate what level they're at. So what we were thinking is, if I pick that particular location, the scouting system knows that that's a score on the rocket. So it could then just, once I do the score, just a second box maybe comes up that looks something like this, and you just pick level 1, 2, or 3, just to indicate what the level is for that score. As soon as you pick it, it goes away. And I'm not a big one for pop-ups, because sometimes the pop-ups is too much to read. But I think in this case, if we have a pictorial representation or something like this, I think it'll be quick. I do the score, the rocket pops up, I hit the 3, and it goes back away again. If I do a score in the cargo ship, it just doesn't do anything else. It just stays there because there's no other questions to be answered. But the rocket is unique because it does have the various levels. Is everybody okay with that? Or this is one I'm actually looking for any other ideas if you have them.
So which would you timestamp? Like, would you timestamp them pressing initially, like, oh, they scored a cargo, or would you timestamp them once they press which level it is on?
I probably would time from the point that they hit the location, because generally the scouter is going to say they just scored right here, and I don't want to have the other second or two while they're doing the rest of this here. So I would probably do the end time of the score as soon as they pick the location, and then have the start time of the return or the pickup, had the start of that cycle be as soon as they pressed one of the score levels. Did I answer your question? Kind of,
Yes.
sort of?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hi. this is Rachel from 4028. So I think with the pop-up for the rocket, I don't even know if you necessarily need it to pop up. Could you just have the buttons become active on the side instead of having the pop-up?
Yeah, we looked at that, but we felt that we were running out of real estate here. The problem is you start putting too many buttons. I don't want the scouters to be reading the text on the buttons. I want them to be watching the game. So the fewest buttons that you have, the better off you are. That's why we take a lot of time to think about button layout and colors and things like that, just to make it easier for the scouter. And if I add 3 more buttons here, it does pose a bit of a challenge because there's just that much more stuff to read and look at.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
So the climb, we've gone round and round and round in different ways to do climbing because we have all these things. We want to time it to each level. What level did you get to? Were you assisted by another robot, or did you assist another team? And we thought about this a lot, trying to come up with the best possible solution and that makes it easy for the scouter, because we started coming up with all kinds of cases where you might climb to level 1 and then somebody helps you get to level 2. So you got to level 1 all by yourself, but somebody helped you to get to level 2. Oh man, how do you scout that? So this is what we came up with, and let me explain real quickly, and hopefully it makes sense by just looking at it. So the green buttons, the reach level 1, level 2, level 3, is I climb to those levels on my own. And as you see, each time I get to a level, it will record whatever the timestamp is on that climb from the initial starting of the climb. If another robot assisted me to that level, that's what the check boxes are for. So if I'm on the floor, someone puts a ramp down, takes me all the way to level 3, then I check box all 3 of those and say I reached level 3. Does that part of it make sense? Is that logical enough that it would be easy for a scouter? Yay, nay, maybe, maybe not.
Yes.
Okay, so think about that for a minute. Go over to the right-hand side is my team or my robot helped another team get to a specific level. Well, we know who the other 2 teammates are, or the system knows what the other 2 teammates are, so we can actually put the 2 team numbers there as indicated by team 9992 and 9996, and we assisted those robots or one of those robots to a specific level. So if they assisted them to level 3, if the 9992, you would just select the up arrow twice and that would get, or 3 times, and that would say I assisted 9992 to level 3. That's the one that I struggle with a little bit. I don't want the scouter to have to press so many things. I don't know another way around it though. I mean, we could have.
Bob, how do you record the time? How do you? I notice here in your example, 8.2 seconds, reach level 2. When did that time begin?
Yep. So if you go back here, there's a start climb button right here. So our start, once again, as Team 5811 said earlier, it's really important to train your scouters to be consistent. Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, as long as they all do it the same way. So what I would train our scouters to do is, in that end game where they're going to climb, as soon as they hit the platform with part of the robot, that's the start of the climb. Now, climbing to level 1 is probably going to be really quick. So as soon as I hit that start climb button, you get this. And if they get to level 1 immediately, then I just click on that level 1, that reached level 1. It might take a little longer for level 2 or level 3.
So they'll click reach level 1. As the robot continues to level 2, it'll then be reach level 2. As the robot continues to level 3, once they reach level 3, they click that button.
That's exactly right. Yes.
That makes sense. Okay.
Once again, this is an area that I'd like you guys to kind of think about. We're open for suggestions here. We were just trying to accommodate all the different cases that could happen. Even things like they reached level 1. Oh, wait, they really didn't. So you can undo the level and basically keep the counter going. And they haven't achieved level 2, even though I said they did. I can undo that level back 1.
Hey Rob, Nick from Team 4028 here.
Yeah.
You just have the thing on the right, the which ones your robot assisted in climbing. Could you not cross-reference that with the rest of the alliance? Then you wouldn't need those checkboxes there.
You could. At some point, you might have instances where 2 robots can help other teams. So someone would have to say either that team assisted me or I assisted another team. We got to have that cross-reference somehow. And if we just say another team helped me and I helped another team, that might work, but you might have instances where you've got more than one team that could help, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
What about, this might be more a case of something you try to do in pit scouting, but because we know the frame perimeter and not width, length, and height dimensions, depending on the dimensions of robots, multiple robots could get to level 3 or to crazily to level 2, or they might not. And you'd also want to know that, like, which team should we pick? Like, if we both can climb or only one of us can, but if we pick this other team, they could climb with us.
Right. So, this was always a fallacy I saw in some other people's systems, is if a team helped me get to level 3, and I was lucky enough to be with a bunch of other teams that always helped me, other scouting systems look like I can actually climb, and I really can't. I have to be helped. So being able to track whether or not somebody helped me get there, I'm not able to do that by myself. So I think that's a really important thing to be able to track, that I can't get there even though I did get there several times.
I was asking more about whether or not multiple robots fit on the top platform, because with 120 inches of frame perimeter, some pairs of robots might, and some trios of robots might, but some of them won't, depending on their dimensions.
Yeah, and there might even be situations that, a ramp is deployed, and even though technically I'm not on the physical platform, if I'm supported above that height by the platform through another robot, that is technically a climb, even though I'm physically not touching the platform. So there's a lot of really corner cases on those kinds of things. We just want to try to be able to accommodate if we can. But I get your point, is there physically may not be space for multiple robots to be there.
Hi. So can we define really quick what level 1 is? Level 1 is the ramp, right?
Yeah, level 1 is, let me just pull this up here. Level 1 is this right here. And actually, this is a really poor picture. And level 2 is right here, and level 3 is right here. There's a definitive spot between here and here. This is a horrible picture for that. It's hard to see.
No, it's fine. I understand. So
this is level 1 down here, this big area here.
Yes. So is it important to define level 1 as its own climb? Or can we just leave it to where you can select level 2 and level 3 and just have it automatically assume, or it ended on the ramp, or it didn't?
That's an option. Absolutely, that's an option. What does everybody else think?
Not necessarily when you assume that because it didn't get to 2 or 3, it's on level 1, though. There are some robots who won't get to level 1, or a strategy may be that a third robot continue to try to score, for example.
Yeah, the trick here is you can get to level 2 without being on level 1. You can go straight to 2 because that's on the side. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think that level 2 is only on the either side of the platform. Is that correct?
You're correct.
So I might be able to get to level 2 without getting to level 1. So in that case, I would just press reach level 2, and I wouldn't have a time for level 1. You know, I guess it would be interesting to know, did I get directly to 2, or did I have to get there by way of level 1? Because that starts being, you know, a traffic coordination thing. If all 3 teams are trying to climb, if they all have to get there through level 1, that's more of a traffic hindrance than if I can go directly to 2 from the side. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here.
But wouldn't you know that through the heat map? You could look at where they start their climb at.
You could.
So would it be better to have just at the end of the match, the robot ended on the platform on level 1?
And I'm fine with that too.
I don't know what's easier, Rob, for you, and visually easier for the scouts.
Yeah, and that's really what my main thing is, making easiest for the scouters, with still being able to collect data. Is it important to capture how long does it take to get to each level, or is it only important what the time it took to get to its final level? Obviously, level 1 is going to be pretty quick. Level 2 is going to be a little longer. Level 3 is going to be even longer, probably. Well, it depends on, I guess, depends on your method. Okay, I don't want to belabor this any longer. Think about it, and we'll loop back to this next week, because I still have some more ground I want to cover here, and we're running out of time. Cycles, we already talked about that, so I won't go into that again. So just one thing to think about, I'm really at a bit of a loss what we would even need these notes for. When I say notes, we have these free form notes here, as you might remember, that the scouter can type anything they want, but we have these check boxes. That way we can kind of accumulate things in a consistent fashion. I don't have any really good ideas for those, so think about that, what you might want there. That's really easy to add more or take them away. It's all driven through the data table. So if we want to add additional notes, we can add those on the fly. But think about that. If there's specific things that are not necessarily something that you keep track of during the course of match scouting, but it's something that you observe over the course of the match. So yes, they were really efficient at driving, or they had trouble picking up the ball, or they kept dropping the ball, or whatever. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that we maybe don't have a definitive count of something, but it's something we want to record in a consistent fashion. So take track of what those things might be, and come back with your ideas. That would be helpful. Likewise, the pick list assistant. How many people used the pick list assistant last year? Did anybody?
We tried, but we had a very difficult time understanding how it all kind of worked out. So that's definitely something that we want to learn more about and how to utilize for this season.
Okay. So just real quickly, I'll just, for those teams that are new here, basically what it comes down to is the pick list is really about trying to find teams that match specific criteria. So this was last year's game. Are they able to do certain things? Yes or no? And then you can put a weighting factor, because if it's something I really, really want, I put a 10. If it's something I kind of need, maybe I'll put a 5. So you can weight each one of these things. And what it does is it goes back and finds all the teams that match the criteria, or at least one of the criteria that you have selected. What it returns is a list of teams, and it gives a percent match and then a weighted percent match. The weighted takes that weighting factor into play. And then over here to the right, it shows a count of how many of each of those things that they have done. So the red ones obviously are they didn't meet the criteria. The green ones are they met the criteria, and here was the count. So one of the things that we're thinking about is possibly even some pickup times if we're going to be doing that. Do I want a team that can at least pick up within 10 seconds or 5 seconds, or with the average of pickup for a cargo is 5 seconds? So we're kind of dabbling with the fact that maybe we can do some of these times if they're going to be consistent enough. But most everything else is pretty consistent. Are you able to score cargo in the rocket at level 3? At least have you done it? Not that you're able to, but have you been able to do it during the course of the matches? So think about these as well, because think about what you're going to want your complementary teams to do to help you in those finals. How do you find a team? The whole idea here is to have the system help you find the team that meets the needs based on those criteria. So I'm going to jump through a couple of things real quickly here. These are some of the enhancements and ideas we're dabbling with, we're looking at for this year. Some actually we're in the process of already doing. This first one, we use a number of libraries, Angular and specific, that is pretty old. It's a number of years old. It's the same Angular JS we've used for a lot of years. They're starting to support those things less and less. So we are upgrading to the newest Angular libraries. Well, what happens here is when you switch to that version of Angular, you also have to switch from JavaScript to TypeScript. And this upgrade we felt we really needed to do. And the downside is it's taking us a bit longer than we had planned, so we are a little behind. Our plan is to kind of get over this as quickly as possible and then move on. But this is actually already underway because we felt we really needed to do that this year. It doesn't really affect anything other than it might be a little bit more efficient code. It might run a little faster, less prone to issues. And that's really what we're looking to do, just to make a more solid platform for everything. We're looking at possibly a team dashboard where I can look at a team across multiple competitions. So basically it would be another dashboard, but it would be specific to a team that we have. So if a team has played in 3 different competitions, we can look at all those matches across all those competitions and span the competitions. The current dashboard, you pick a competition and you look at all the data for that one competition. When you start getting to things like Worlds, you might want to look at how the team has progressed, what they have done at various competitions. So that's one of the ideas we're working on right now. So another issue that we've had in the past is because it is a live system with the server, and everyone knows how true cell phone and Bluetooth communication is, we have had some issues in the past that if we have a communication problem, the communication to the server dictates some things during the course of match scouting. Probably the most common one, and everyone's probably going to shake their head when I say this, is you're all done getting set up for that match. They say start match, you start the match, and there it sits. And you're waiting for the system to switch over. Well, because when you do that, it actually has to query the server because it gives it an ID for that particular match. Well, what we're trying to do is try to make the match scouting client more self-sufficient. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the client generate that ID, so there's no communication check required at the server. Once you get into match scouting, the client side or the tablet can pretty much operate completely autonomously because it doesn't need the server for anything. The other thing is at the end of every match, when it goes to push all the data, if the server has if it has lost communication, it holds it in a queue and it will flush the queue when it's able to. So if it happens to reestablish communication, it'll flush the queue and everybody's happy at that point. So we're just looking at any opportunity that we can to minimize the communication between that tablet and the server, just to make it a little bit more autonomous. So hopefully that will help some of those things. We're also caching more and more of the data, like the match schedule, the graphics and stuff like that, so it doesn't need the server very often. And this is what I was talking about, is this is the client initiated instance instead of having to get that from the server. Last year, we also we had some performance problems the year before last, and in order to fix that, what we did is we basically created a flushing mechanism in the background to go get all the data periodically. Problem is we lost some of that real-time capability. The best or the worst case scenario, we had about a 15-minute delay, and that might have been a match or two delay on our data. And it all depended upon when it went to go fetch that data, because it kind of held that background process of flushing it into a sort of a data center that would pull that in for reporting purposes. So I've looked at a lot of things over the summer, and we've got some serious improvements on the back-end data side, and I think we can go back to real-time data on the dashboards instead of having to do that whole flushing mechanism. So we'll experiment with that. If it finds that we start getting too much lag again, then we can immediately turn on the other piece, but I think we can get away from that this year based on some of the changes that we've made on the back end. So look for improvements on that. So that should be pretty significant. Another thing we're looking for is possibly some kind of watchdog status that we can show on the tablet, whether or not we're still attached to the server, just maybe a green or red light that's on the status bar. Just, we'll just do a watchdog every minute or two just to see, can we still talk to the server? If we can, it'll keep the light green. If we lost it, it'll turn it to red. Just an indicator whether or not you have communication with the server. And then we already talked about this full cycle timing. So for next week, we really need ideas. Ideas for match scouting notes, ideas for pit scouting, ideas for pick list items. But most importantly, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about charts and graphs. This is really key, because this is really what the system is all about, is to help you with your strategy. We will have all the standard graphs that are things like trends, match over match, what does a team do? What are the total numbers? What are the average per match, stuff like that. So those are pretty straightforward. If you really come up with something clever or unique, let us know, because that's really what we're looking for. This is what really makes the system, is how well it can help you with your strategy. So think about what data we have, what would we be able to create as a graph. Pretty much any data is available. You know what's available. That's why I went through that whole thing earlier. So anything that you can use that data for, we can build a graph off of. So let me know that, or if you have anything before then, even if it's like an Excel spreadsheet that you created a graph or hand-drawn something, scan it in and email it to me, because I will use that next week and we'll kind of walk through some of those things. And if you're the team that sent it in, I'd be happy to have you take the floor and explain what it would be used for and how that might help you. So please send me stuff. As always, my email, rob.miller@innovatorsrobotics.com. Any questions or comments before we sign off? I'm sorry I ran a little long this evening.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding rocket scoring, if someone were to be placing or shooting towards a higher goal, say, and they miss, is there a way to tell, or can there be a way to tell if they missed on a certain level?
We chatted about that briefly, and you start getting into make and miss, and that adds a whole other level for the scouter, because you have to log, and I'm not opposed to doing it, because then you can do things like percent shooting. From the high level, they're shooting at 60%. From the mid level, they shoot at 80%. You could do some really intriguing stuff with that. The question I have for you is how many teams do you feel are going to be shooting versus placing?
Well, it may not even be shooting. It may be that, let's say, a robot has placed all of their hatches on the cargo ship and placed their cargo and went to the rocket and placed their items on the lower portion, but went up with an elevator, say, to place on the higher levels and missed. We wouldn't have a way to document that they missed on a higher level and not a lower one.
Yep, and that's a good point. That's a really good point. We have a drop, but we wouldn't know that they dropped it when they're trying to do something specific.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hey Rob, I don't think you touched on this, but one concern we've had is visibility on the far side of the cargo ship, because robots are 4 feet tall and so is the cargo ship. And seeing hatch placements is impossible if you're looking directly from the side of the field.
I absolutely concur. I think that's going to be the worst thing to see. The nice thing is the rockets themselves have the back sawed off of them this year, so at least we know when things are coming in from the other side. But I think you're going to kind of have to infer based on what I picked up. I picked up a hatch, and I've gone over to the hatch. I don't have it anymore, so I must have placed it. Now, what we don't know is if they've dropped it on the floor, and I think that's going to be the worst thing.
Would you consider using Blue Alliance to check that? Because you don't get to be perfectly accurate, but you could, from the total number of hatches, determine if those hatches are scored on the backside.
Yeah, we could. We've done things like that in the past. Do you remember I don't know if you remember the game Stronghold, where we had to cross over that stuff all the time? We used the actually we used First API, which is the same data. We used the First API to validate what position those things were in, because sometimes the scouters didn't put them in right, so we would fix them on the fly. So we have done things like that in the past, pulling data from First API, but it is going to be an estimation because we don't know by what team. The field system does not do anything by team except for the initial line cross during the sandstorm or autonomous. Everything else is by alliance. So we wouldn't necessarily know that a team did it versus a team missed it. So for instance, if it said that all 8 hatch covers were there, but we logged that 10 teams went there, we wouldn't know which one missed it and which one made it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any tricks or thinking about stuff like that. I was aware that the Blue Alliance doesn't, or First API rather, doesn't track by team. So
yeah, nothing tracks by. If they tracked by team, we would extract as much as we could and make it really easy on the scouters. But it does everything by alliance, and everything that I know for this year, it's still going to be the same.
Yeah, so the only sort of out of the box idea we had was putting scouters on looking down the length of the field, which I think could work, but probably is hassle, not to mention the fact that you then have 2 scouting stations, which is obviously not ideal.
Yeah, that does pose a little bit of a coordination challenge. We've done that in the past, and that is a little bit more difficult.
Is there a way to cross-reference what the ref is saying that they scored at and what the scout is saying where they scored at? Like timestamp?
I don't believe the First API has timestamps. Now, last year, the Blue Alliance did timestamped on a number of things, but they didn't publish that till long after the competition was over, and that wouldn't help us at all. It's not real time. Yeah, if they timestamp it, that would help a little bit, of looking at when things got scored, and we could cross-reference it back because we do track the whole match timing from the point that they start to the point the match is over. We'll look into that. That is one possibility. Anything else? Okay. Hey, great discussion, folks. Really appreciate the interaction. That's really what makes the system. You guys think of things that I don't or that we don't, and the more conversation that we have about this, the better we can make this. Thanks all, and believe me, send me stuff. I love getting email from people with ideas, with especially mock-ups of dashboards or charts. Really helpful. Thanks again, and have a good evening.